Savanah.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to be doing an interview with Jordyn Jay, the founder of the Black Trans Femmes Art Collective, and we're going to be talking about the short Netflix film, Canvas.
In this episode, we would like to just take a moment to honor Black History Month. We recognize that collectively we should be amplifying the work of Black communities every day out of the year, but it's still nonetheless important to still celebrate their achievements during this month, which is why we are taking the time to interview Jordyn and talk about Canvas and some other really great things like that. In the description for this podcast episode, we're going to have some links to some really great Black-led organizations that we'd really like to encourage everybody to go check out and to support in whatever way they can. One of them is going to be Black Lives Matter Metro Phoenix, which is a local organization to where Ryan and I are here in the Phoenix greater area of Arizona. We also just want to encourage everybody to go out and look for different Black creators in whatever fields are your particular interests, maybe some Black video game creators, Black artists, Black directors, all different kinds of people, and just really try to give your support to them in any way that you can. We also just want to take a moment to remind everybody that justice for Breonna Taylor still has not been achieved, and we need to continue to try to fight for that to happen. Lastly, kind of unrelated, we also just wanted to note that today we are filming on February 9th, 2021, and it is somewhat of a potentially historic day because it's the first day of the Senate impeachment trial, and this is the first time this has ever happened to a president 2 times in a row. So we just wanted to note that before we get started in talking about this stuff. So firstly, we just kind of want to let everybody know how this podcast is going to be organized, since it's a little bit different since we have our very first interview, which is super exciting. So the first part of this podcast is going to be our interview with Jordyn Jay talking about her organization Black Trans Femmes Art Collective. So that will be following this. And then after that, we're going to be doing a little bit of a dive into the Netflix animated short titled Canvas. All right, so hello everybody who's listening in to our podcast today. We're so excited because we have our very first guest to be interviewed, Miss Jordyn Jay. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're super excited. So a little bit of background about Jordyn. She is originally from Jacksonville, Florida, and she is a community organizer, arts advocate, and producer based in Brooklyn, New York. She is the founder and executive director of Black Trans Femmes in the Arts Collective, also known as Btfa. Before founding Btfa, Jordyn received her master's degree in arts politics from NYU Tisch School of the Arts. Jordyn is a firm believer in the power of art to inspire radical socio-political change and is dedicated to using that power for Black trans liberation. As a side note, I personally know Jordyn from the arts politics department at NYU. We were in a cohort there together, and we had many classes together and spent many nights doing a happy hour karaoke. So I'm very excited to have Jordyn here with us today.
So excited to be reunited, even virtually.
Yes. So Jordyn, I think first off, we just kind of want to hear a little bit about what led you to decide to create Btfa Collective.
So while I was studying at APP, which is Art Public Policy, the department we were just talking about, I was really invested in finding Black trans artists to use in my work. And I was really struggling to connect with the Black trans artists and to learn more about Black trans art history. And so as soon as APP ended and I had a little bit of space to breathe, I brought some folks together and had a meetup for Black trans femme artists to kind of talk about like what was going on in the community, what were people doing, what were barriers people were facing. Because not only was I just genuinely curious, but I was also really invested in taking my position as being someone who has a master's in art politics really seriously, and wanted to make sure that I was using that to support my community in any way I could. So after that first meetup, it became just so clear how necessary it was for us to have some type of organized structure to come together and meet regularly and to work through issues we were facing as artists and as art administrators, art advocates, like I call myself. So I started organizing more, and we had a open mic night that was featuring artists who the meetup, but also new artists. We kind of did everything through social media. So like anytime I was looking for new artists, I would just post something on social media and just hope that they bring me people, and it did. So in November of 2019, we hosted our first open mic night at Star Bar in Brooklyn, and it was amazing. There was, I think, 9 Black Trans Femme performers of like all different genres. There was spoken word, there was lip syncing, rapping, there was a short film that was shown. And there was about 50 or 60 people in the audience. And then from there, we just kept working, and we started doing things on social media and hosting events via social media and engaging with people in that way. And it kind of snowballed into something that I never imagined it would be. I didn't think that Btfa would become an organization, at least not so quickly. But it's been really amazing to kind of have this thing that just started from me wanting to connect with folks and learn more about art in my community. And now it's something where we're able to connect with artists and support artists globally.
That's so wonderful to hear, because I know that frustration of trying to seek specific people and representation in arts. And I recently was just like, I'm thinking about Black creators in video games, and I'm really passionate about the gaming industry. And I was like, surely there must be some people that are in the industry. And I'm just looking, and it's just so hard to find, especially in, it's hard to get Black people in the video game industry, let alone trans people. It's just so blocked off. And I mean, it's really inspiring to know that if you are looking, you will find. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think just as much as we want to connect and know about those artists, there are those artists out there that are desperately looking for people to support and to engage with their work. And social media has been so amazing in that it allows us to connect with those people and not have to wait until an artist is mentioned in like a major publication or is invited to speak at a museum or something like that, that we can just engage directly with the people who are creating and learn more about their work and the process behind their work and how we can show up for them.
It's been really incredible to watch this all unfold from knowing you kind of on the sidelines. And I remember being in classes with you that were kind of like art history focused, and you would always really make a point to mention like when there was kind of like a gap in the curriculum of not looking at either Black artists or trans artists. So I think even from like an educational standpoint, having this type of resource for educators or other people who are looking to integrate more diverse voices in the types of artists that they talk about is really great. I was curious about kind of how has your organization shifted at all during the past year with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement that really gained a lot of steam over the summer. I'm just curious if there's been any changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we've kind of blown up in the pandemic and in the context of Black Lives Matter. So it's hard to think about like how things have changed from our original goal and vision. But yeah, like right before the pandemic happened, we had 2 fundraising happy hour events planned here in New York City. And they were set to happen, I think, like the week of March 15th or something like that. And so when coronavirus was declared a pandemic and everything started to shut down, we had to kind of like rethink and restructure how we were going to do things. And so we shifted to doing like more social media engagement. And Mojo Disco, who's a member of the collective, had the idea to do tea talks, which were and still are Instagram live. Kind of, it's a talk show really. So it's like interviews with prominent Black trans femme artists, where we just talk to them and ask them about their work and about themselves as human beings. And I think people really connected to that a lot. And then when there was the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and protests are happening worldwide, I was thinking really critically about like, how do we support and protect trans people here? You know, I saw a case of a trans woman who was violated by police after protesting in my hometown. And there was a protest for Black trans lives happening here in New York. And I just like became really overwhelmed with anxiety and was thinking like, okay, how do we make sure that our community is safe? And so I reached out to a few other organizers I know, and then Btfa launched the Black Trans Protesters Emergency Fund that was to provide medical relief, legal support, and bail relief to Black trans protesters. And that went viral and was reposted by like Charlie XCX and Troye Sivan and a bunch of celebrities. The Schitt's Creek production crew reached out to us to offer their support. So that was kind of like the jumping off point for Btfa to do a lot of the things we do now in conjunction with Pride happening at the same time. And people were trying to celebrate Pride virtually and figuring out ways to support the community other than like throwing big parties like they normally do. So I would say that like everything that's happened this year has definitely shifted our expectations, but also kind of set us up to be able to do the work that we do now, to be able to executive produce projects and host artists in residence and open up a new studio. So it's been definitely a blessing and a curse, and we don't take it lightly that all of this has happened because of suffering and trauma. But we're happy that we now have the resources because of that attention to do things that are really helping our community.
I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, where you ask someone and you ask, are you feeling okay? Are you good? And they're like, yeah, I'm good for the situation. But in reality, I actually am doing okay in this environment. I am thriving as a person who likes to work from home, and I'm thriving as a person that doesn't have to commute every day. And that's something more relatable than maybe your organization blowing up because of tragedy. But on a small scale, I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that story as well. And it's a lot to think about and cope with. And just in general, I feel like I don't really know you, Jordyn, but I really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's really just life, I guess, is holding the good with the bad and, making space for celebration, even in the midst of tragedy, which is something that, I'm still working on. It's like, okay, Jordyn, like good things are happening, like celebrate and embrace those moments, even though the world outside is kind of going haywire.
Yeah, and on that side of the coin, what has been the happiest moment? What has been the most joyous takeaway from the Btfa? Can you think of anything where you're like, this is the moment, like this is how I know that this is really something?
I feel like there's been different moments along the way. Like I can point to like a timeline of moments. I think the first moment was at our very first meetup, and I was expecting like a bunch of people. Like I thought it was going to be a big thing. I was like, oh my God, I'm so underprepared. Like I don't have enough of this and this and this. And then like 6 or 8 people showed up. And I was kind of disappointed. And then at the very end, someone told me that this was the first time that they left their house in months, was to come to this meetup. And I was like, okay, that makes it all worth it. Like this is something that needs to keep happening. And then, just any of those moments where I had with Black trans femme artists and they expressed how much the collective had done for them or how much they needed it, and that they felt supported for the first time in their career or even their lives in a really specific way, has been incredibly meaningful. Personally, there's moments that have also really been big, like when Beyonce shared Btfa on her Instagram as part of like a collection of small Black-owned businesses. I was literally blown away. Someone sent me this screenshot and I was like, did you Photoshop this to prank me? Like, this is so cruel. Like, why would you do this to me? Like, and then I realized it was real. And I was on the phone with my best friend and I was like, I have to go because I'm going to cry. I don't know, that makes you uncomfortable. So I hung up and just started sobbing because I just couldn't believe that Beyonce had shared in something that I created. It was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I can imagine knowing you and how much you love Beyonce. I can imagine how incredible that must have felt.
Sometimes I forget because it just feels so unreal. I'm like, no, Beyonce did in fact share Btfa on her website, and it's still there. I have to go back and check every now and then just to be like, that's still a thing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then we wanted to know, like, who are some BTFA artists that we should be looking at? Who should be checking out? Who should we be telling our listeners to go look at?
There's a lot. So we're curating a directory right now called The List that is going to be a public directory of Black trans femme artists globally, that people can go to our website and find an artist to support or engage with, or hire, that's either in their area or that works in the field that they work in. And that's launching next month, actually. So I've been going through and like finding new artists, and we've been spotlighting some on our Instagram. And I've discovered so many amazing visual artists that I really wish I had known about during my time at APP. Glory to It is an amazing visual artist. I just purchased one of her prints, actually. Gwendolyn Paris is another amazing visual artist. I've been following her work for a while, and recently GC2B did a capsule of clothing and merch inspired by and featuring the work of Black, queer, and trans artists for Black History Month. And Gwendolyn is one of the featured artists. So there's like sweatshirts with her work on it and mugs with her work on it. She does amazing portraiture, and just like really creative seems counterproductive because it's art and all art is creative. But I think that the way that she works with like images of the body is really creative, and reminds me a little bit of Frida Kahlo. Who else in the collective? There's some amazing rap artists in the collective. Mercy D, her song Wait is one of my recent favorites. Iman Hill had an EP called If Mona Lisa Could Talk that she released, I believe, in 2020 that I've been listening to. And also Rara Gabor, she released a song called Chase, or Chaser, actually, a few weeks ago that I've really been loving.
I really love how BTFA is really kind of covering all different types of artists and all different kinds of mediums. Have you noticed if the needs of all these different types of artists are kind of different? Are they looking for kind of the same support? What have you noticed?
Yeah, I think the needs of all the artists in the collective are different, especially given some of their like geographical locations. Like we are connected with artists in like the Midwest and also in Africa and in Europe, and the needs are in the South as well. The needs are just so different based on their location. But I think that the thing that all of them are looking for is, you know, support, validation, for people to just engage with their work in any way. So I'm really happy we're able to do that through our platform. But I think that support, validation, and safety are also like the biggest needs that are there across the board.
So you mentioned the list for kind of the next month coming out, for people that we can look forward to support. Any other future plans that you can reveal for us coming up this year, or is that all under wraps?
Oh, no. We have a lot of things happening in 2021. There's a few brand and company partnerships that are yet to be announced, but that's definitely something to look out for. We are opening up Btfa Studios, which is a 2,100 square foot space in the Brooklyn Navy Yards that is going to have a visual art studio, a photo video studio, and office and co-working space, as well as space to display the work of Black trans femme visual artists on our walls. And in that studio, we'll be hosting our first artist in residence, Kiki Williams. She is a visual really a multidisciplinary artist, but a lot of her work is visual art. She recently did a series called How to Fry an American Flag, where she seasoned and deep fries American flags. She hosted Pig Roast over the summer as like not only a community gathering, but a protest against police brutality. And this year she's working on life-size sculptures of the body made from like a mushroom compound that will continue to grow and live after the sculpture is complete. So we're really excited about that. And what else is coming? More productions are coming in 2021. We started Btfa Productions in 2020, and we did a rap music video. We did a dance tribute video to Black Trans Love, and we did a homage to Michael Jackson's Thriller, but there's still so much more to come in 2021, and even projects that we worked on in 2020 that haven't been released yet.
That all sounds so exciting. It makes me wish that I was still in New York so I could go see some of these things in person.
No, I'm so sad that we won't have our space and like our public events are postponed until further notice because of COVID right now, but hopefully everyone gets to enjoy everything digitally, and then when we're back in person, we can all come together and have a big party.
So now we will kind of switch into some questions that are maybe a little bit more fun or outside of BTFA, just kind of stuff that we are interested in. So one of the things that we are curious about are who are some artists, these could be visual artists, musicians, actors, directors, that you feel like should be getting more attention right now, or maybe just your favorites in general, the greatest hits that Jordyn loves of different creators.
It's hard to say because I feel like right now I'm just so like nose deep in BTFA that I haven't been engaging in a lot of other art or consuming a lot of other art. But I can talk about a piece that I think should be getting more recognition. I don't know if either of you have seen Veneno on HBO Max, but it is a show about Cristina Ortiz Rodriguez, also known as La Veneno, and she was a sex worker, a trans sex worker in Spain who became famous in like the mid 90s as a TV personality. And it just kind of talks about her early life, and it touches briefly on her life in the spotlight, but also really talks about kind of her tumble out of the spotlight and what her story leading up to being in the spotlight kind of like did to her internally, and everything she had to go through and all the demons that she carried. And I think that there's a lot of irony in her name being Veneno, which is poison in Spanish, and how the lifestyle she lived was kind of poisonous and eventually killed her in the end. But it's a really beautiful story. It's one of the best examples of trans representation I've ever seen on screen. It's definitely a tearjerker. So prepare yourself, especially the first 2 episodes. And the final episode, I was just like crying like a baby. But it's an amazing piece of work, and it's so raw and humanizing, and I don't think that we often get to see trans people in a light that's raw and gritty while being humanizing at the same time.
Yeah, I have seen that on HBO. It's been on my list of things that I want to watch, so now it's definitely moved, I think, up to the top of the list of things that I want to watch next.
It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Like, not trans related, just generally, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Wow.
I guess that'll be my Valentine's Day weekend, so thank you anyways. So back to pop culture, and hopefully not too much of a tonal shift, because later on in the same episode we are talking about grief, so I don't want this episode to be too much of a downer, but do you have any favorite moments in pop culture in general, kind of iconic moments that you can think of that just kind of live rent-free in your head?
I have so many. I love pop culture, and I think I've been on TikTok a lot, which has been bringing up a lot of like pop culture things that I forgot lately. But the first one that comes to mind is, I don't remember what year it was, But when Little Kim got out of jail and she had two like guards walk her out to the VMAs in an orange jumpsuit as like her return, that is a pop culture moment that I absolutely live for. I also like love the Whitney Houston, Diane Sawyer interview where she says, "Crack is whack. I make too much money to ever smoke crack." Whitney has so many iconic pop culture moments. And like the whole like early 2000s It Girl feud, like I'll never get enough of like researching it and learning more about it, like between Hilary Duff and Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, just like all of those It Girls. That was such a, like, that was the defining moment in pop culture for me. Like they kept the tabloids running for years. So many people owe their career to them. Yeah, I think those are my top ones.
Yeah, those are all definitely tops. 100% for real. Another one that comes to mind recently is I feel like around the Super Bowl time, more and more every single year, I'm really proud to see all those Janet stans out there come forth and stand up for her.
Absolutely. I was gonna say that I personally lived for the Janet nipple out at the Super Bowl, but I hated how she was vilified and her career was nearly ruined because of that moment. When she is one of, if not the most influential people in pop music, and like people were just so willing to throw her away because of like a moment of like nipple slipping, and like completely ignored that Justin Timberlake was a part of it, let his career go on. I'm so happy to see that like everyone is acknowledging Super Bowl Sunday is Janet Jackson Appreciation Day. And I'm also so happy to see that Justin Timberlake is getting more hate, also with the Britney documentary that came out, which I haven't seen yet, but I really want to.
Yeah, I just watched the Britney documentary over the weekend, and I was really glad to see how they kind of really went after Justin Timberlake in it, and I kind of hope that he has a downfall, honestly. As much as I've enjoyed his music over the years, I kind of feel like it's time that he fades out of the spotlight at this point.
Yeah.
Who's checking for Justin Timberlake's music in 2021? Right? It's like, we're not losing anything.
True.
Unfortunately, Trolls is influential and unstoppable, it seems like. So we do have to contend with that. But I think I'm okay with Justin singing B-grade pop covers. I think that's where he belongs in the music industry.
All right. So I think just kind of like to wrap up, we just kind of want to hear anything else that you would want to tell our listeners right now. Anything else you would like everybody to know? We're definitely going to be listing information on how to contact you and information about Btfa Collective on the descriptions for our podcast. So anything else you'd like everybody to know about?
No, I think I spilled all the Btfa tea. I don't know if there's anything I didn't touch on, but if you want to, find Btfa and see what we do, maybe we'll do something that surprises me before this podcast comes out. So our Instagram is at Btfa Collective. It's the same handle on Twitter. Our website's btfacollective.org. So check us out. We're always doing fun new things. Right now for Black History Month, we're highlighting Black trans history makers. We wanted to turn a light on people who are making history in the moment and get a bit of their history in their own words while we still have the chance. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We just posted a new one today featuring Amara Jones, who is a trailblazer for the Black trans community and the founder of Trans Media. So yeah, there's more to come. Stay tuned.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it, and we thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know it's a little late over in New York right now, so thank you.
Wow. That's really awesome that you got to go to school with her, Savanah. So like, were you in classes with Jordyn?
I was in several classes with Jordyn. Our cohort was pretty small. I think we only had 20 people in my cohort, maybe 21. So I had several classes with Jordyn, and we hung out sometimes. Like I said, we did karaoke together on multiple occasions. So yeah,
very cool.
I love getting to know her, I'm glad she's my friend.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to meet her. And she definitely said a lot of insightful things and gave a lot of information that I'm going to be looking into. I don't consume nearly as much art as I probably should to be associated with you. But I'm just looking to branch out. I'm looking to look at other things.
And I definitely want to check out some of the rappers that she mentioned as well and hear some of the songs that she told us about. So we'll definitely try to link as many of those people as we can in our description as well, so you can check them out too.
But now on to our part 2 of the podcast, where we're going to be discussing Canvas, directed and written by Black filmmaker and animator Frank E. Abney III. So I just want to go over some background details about that. It was produced by Netflix. It is a 9-minute short, and the IMDb description is, after suffering a loss, a painter finds his inspiration to create again. So a little bit of background on Mr. Abney. We know him. He was an apprentice animator for the first Frozen, and he's kind of taken out other positions as an animator in other Pixar films, like The Incredibles 2 and Coco, and most recently Soul. He's also the founder of Rise-Up Animation, whose mission is to help animators of color break into the business, which I thought was amazing. I had no idea he was such a prolific animator, and I had no idea how much work of his that I've already seen. I mean, watching Canvas visually, it does look like a Disney Pixar hand touch that thing. So I was kind of expecting him to be in some things that I had seen, but I didn't expect him to be in so many. How about you, Savanah?
Yeah, I am glad that you said that, because I did not know that he was connected to Disney in that way, but you can definitely tell when watching it. It has kind of a Disney aesthetic to it. And that's really great to hear about that organization that he's created.
So just kind of general, non-spoilery thoughts on the film in case you wanted to stop listen before we kind of dig into it. It's only a 9-minute film, so if you wanted to just watch it real quick on your phone and come back, you're more than welcome to. But it is a film centered on the theme of grief, and I do know that Frank Abney, it's based on a loss of his. In some of the articles that I read, it didn't quite say what loss he suffered, but you can tell that this is a personal story for him. Overall, I thought the film was a film. I enjoyed it for the 9 minutes that it was, but we can get into my thoughts a little bit deeper there. It is hard to critique a story that is so personal to the author, so we can talk about that feeling a little bit later in the podcast. Savanah, what are your kind of general thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I did not know how personal of a story it was to the creator, but I'm glad that I do know that now. I don't know, I guess I don't really find that to be difficult, I guess, to critique something, even if I know that it's very personal to the person, because I think I kind of assume that most things are personal to creators. Like if it is, whether that be a song, I guess not, okay, maybe not a song, because not everybody is a singer-songwriter, but people who are singer-songwriters or visual artists or directors, I think I often assume that there is some type of personal connection to what it is they're making, unless it's something like, I don't know, Transformers. But maybe Michael Bay has a personal connection to Transformers. I don't know. But typically, I think I do assume that there is a personal connection there. At least for me, as an artist, like in the artwork that I make, there always is a very personal connection, or connection to family or things like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Moving on to spoiler territory here, and our kind of spoiler thoughts. I just wanted to go over the film really quick so we can understand questions that we're going to be going over later. So the film starts with this beautiful hand-drawn animation, and I believe I get from the film, it is a silent film. There's no spoken dialogue. There's a man who has lost his wife. I don't know if it was early on or unexpected. I didn't really glean that from the story, but you can tell because he has a wedding ring and there is an empty spot in the bed beside him. And so he kind of feels like he's going through life in a daze. Nothing is as joyous to him as it once was. You have kind of some melancholy, somber moments with his daughter and his granddaughter. And his granddaughter goes into the back of a room somewhere hidden away in his house. This is kind of a trope that I often see where she's not supposed to be there. So his granddaughter discovers something that he made in the past And this man happens upon his granddaughter, gets initially kind of mad at her, but ends up forgiving her and kind of moving past his grief to paint again. He touches the canvas of this painting, and he's kind of sucked back into that beautiful world that we started out in, that hand-drawn animation, and he starts to paint again. And I think that's the summary I have for it. Savanah, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would just like to take a moment to really show an appreciation for the animation in this short, specifically that hand-drawn moment in the beginning and that other little dream sequence in it was so beautiful. And I was really impressed because I watched this short twice. The first time I watched it on the TV, and the second time I watched it on my computer where I was a little bit closer to the screen. And I just really loved how in those dream sequences, it actually looks like a canvas. Like if you've ever seen a canvas like to paint on, you can see like these little tiny lines of like all the fibers in it that make up the canvas. You can actually see that in the animation, and I just was really blown away by that. And just other little details like in all of the hair or little just like ambient like dust and stuff, I really noticed and was very, very impressed by.
Yeah, and I think with short films specifically, you do see a lot of animation tactics that are kind of on the cutting edge because it's easier to work with in shorter amounts of time. I think you see that a lot with Pixar shorts at the beginning of the film, where it just looks like real life. I really think of Piper, that little short film with the bird. I can't remember what film it showed before, but I was blown away the first time I saw that thing. The sand, the bird, everything. Do you remember that one, Savanah?
Yes, I do. I also really remember the one with the umbrellas. I don't remember which one that was called or what that was before. For some reason, I feel like it was before Ratatouille, but that doesn't, I don't know. But I would remember just seeing like the rain falling in it and just being like so incredibly shocked. And I know like for how short these animated shorts tend to be, they take a really long time to produce and to make.
Animation is hard. I don't know if you recently watched on Disney Plus, they have the Making of Frozen 2 documentary, and it like blew my mind about how much work one person puts into like 30 seconds, and I honestly had no idea. That's why animation takes so long. But I feel like that particular documentary really gave me an insight to how much work goes into something that's has a big budget and has a lot of eyes on it. So it was just crazy to me. But kind of moving on, I wanted to talk about how Canvas handles grief. And personally, I didn't feel it. I wasn't effective. I can't help but compare it to the epitome of how grief can be portrayed in the first couple minutes of Up. Like, I can't help but making that comparison in my head. If you haven't seen Up, who are you? Where have you been? But the first couple minutes of Up portrays a man losing his wife. And it's just so heartbreaking. And I didn't feel that here.
We're kind of different in the way that things, I think, hit us emotionally. Like I said, I watched this twice and I cried both times. But I don't know. I think I'm already just kind of have a predisposition to get teary over things that are emotional, like short films. For whatever reason, I feel like animated shorts in particular are always very emotional and very like sad, or have like tragedy be the main theme of them. So maybe I was already just like in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, I'm definitely gonna cry while I watch this. So then I was just like ready for it. When I first was watching it, I think I wasn't expecting still though necessarily to be affected emotionally by it, just because it's pretty obvious of a story. I mean, again, it's only 9 minutes, so it's not like they can do too much foreshadowing or like anything like that. Like, it's obvious what the story is right from the beginning, which I think made me feel like it's not going to be like too sad or anything like that, because like already it's about the loss of his wife. It still, I think, did hit me a little bit.
It really did not get me at all. I don't know what it was. I thought it did a really good job showing what it was trying to show. Like I mentioned before, you saw the wedding band and you saw the empty space beside him. You saw the sad look in his daughter's eyes as she kissed his forehead. You saw how happy he was to see that his granddaughter was drawing and kind of following in his footsteps. And you saw the joy of him seeing his wife again in the canvas. It did a lot of things effectively, but I didn't feel anything while watching it. Maybe it's because it's a story that I don't relate to yet, or I've never felt a grief as deep as I'm sure that is, and I'm too young, so I don't know.
I think it's kind of an interesting comparison to compare it to Up, because they present a similar story in a different way. Like for Up, they'd really take you through the whole story of this man and this woman meeting each other, falling in love, trying to have a baby, not being able to have a baby, deciding to go on an adventure instead together, and then the wife unfortunately dying before they're able to do that. And so you really like become a part of their whole story because you know all the story, versus Canvas doesn't use any of that type of background information. It just purely presents you with this person who has already experienced all of that. So it makes sense that maybe it wouldn't be as it wouldn't elicit as much of an emotion if you don't have a reference point for those things. But I liked how it kind of framed grief more so around like him and his relationships with the other people in his life, which you see a little bit of that in Up as well, like his relationship with his neighbor and how he interacts with people. But it's kind of more so focused on maybe like a family dynamic in Canvas and how maybe this experience has changed how he relates to his daughter or to his granddaughter.
Mm-hmm. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, I did think it effectively showed how you can get through grief. It was hopeful at the end, and this is a part of pop culture. Do you feel like this is the typical way that handling grief is represented, or do you think it was against the grain? What do you think?
I feel like it was pretty typical. I don't think that there was anything unusual about how it was presented. If anything, I feel like it might have kind of done like the typical like, oh, everything's okay now kind of a thing, which I don't really think is the reality with grief. I think it's something that like lingers with people for a really long time, or potentially the rest of their life, even if it's in small amounts. And this kind of made it seem like, oh, now he's back to painting again and everything, he's gonna feel better all the time, which maybe that's just like, I could see how that would be like an overreaching idea of maybe what it's trying to get at, just because it is so limited in what it's showing. But that to me is, I think, pretty typical, like as far as especially how we like discuss grief in like Western society, and it is often not necessarily portrayed for like the full reality of what it can be for people.
I think it's also pretty typical portrayal of grief. I mean, we have so many representations of grief in media, and yet I do still feel like, I guess shame would be the word, or I want to hide away, not show it, be strong, even though I do consume a lot of media where they show that it's okay to get over your grief, like The Lovely Bones. I feel like shows beautifully the parents getting over their grief of their murdered child, or even The Babadook, a wonderful portrayal of learning to live with your grief and living with your inner monsters, and feeding them every once in a while, checking on them, and making sure that they're okay. So I think more and more grief is being represented as trauma and something that you have to go through and live with. And yet I'm still a product of the world, and I still feel like I need to not show it. Do you feel the same way?
I think so. I think like the most progressive ways I've seen people discussing grief and the reality of what it can really be have been more so in like mental health circles versus in media, which is a larger issue of just needing to have more representation of issues of mental health in pop culture and media largely. It kind of depends. I personally feel more open to talking about how I'm really feeling with people who I know have experienced similar things that I have. But for other people who I know who haven't experienced that kinds of thing, because we are on the younger side in the spectrum of age, and so maybe some of our peers haven't had to experience grief in some of the ways that maybe we have, and it's kind of hard sometimes to talk about that, especially in Western culture, often with anything related to mental health, it's kind of like a get over it kind of idea. More largely, I think that that's changing, but with anything from grief to depression or anxiety, often for a long time, it's always been like, oh, well, if you do this and this and this, then you're going to be fine. Your depression will be cured. You'll be able to get out of bed every day with no problem. And that's not really the reality of what it is to deal with those things.
Going off of that, I mean, we've all had to live in kind of a grief state almost for the year of 2020. We've had to live in a societal grief where a lot of people all around the world, including us, are experiencing loss unprecedented. And we all just feel disenfranchised by our government at the time and how the way it was handled. And we feel a lot of rage among that grief. There's been a lot of talk recently about how to cope with that societal rage, and I'm excited to see how media and art picks up on that for something that I would watch and consume. In animation, comics, TV shows, and movies, and I hope that it's a topic that it gets looked into more and is more accessible.
I hope so too. For reference, like Ryan and I, we both lost our grandmother this year due to COVID. So we have been dealing with grief in many different ways. And I think that I hope that when we do talk about this time period and the way that we talk about grief, that it is in a much more real way. Like, I hope that looking back at this time when people are making movies about people going through this, that they recognize that it has been much more difficult for communities of color and Indigenous people during this time, and that it's been a multitude of ways that people have been experiencing grief. So I hope that it's all encompassing, but I am looking forward to seeing a larger discussion happen.
I think for every serious post that I see about taking our communal grief seriously and really being introspective, I see at least 15 memes, maybe even 20 memes, just making humorous coping. So I also hope that in retrospective we are more serious and that we're able to look past the humor as coping to have a more real discussion. Not that humor isn't real, but to kind of move past that and take it a bit more seriously.
Yeah, or at least have space for both. Because I think we have a propensity to kind of lean towards like humorous coping or dark humor, things like that, when sometimes I think that can just be a way to like hide maybe how you're really feeling about things.
Mm-hmm. But on a lighter topic, as I mentioned, I didn't really like Canvas very much. I thought it was a little bit boring, a little bit dry. I honestly feel like I missed something. I don't know what I missed, but I feel like I missed something. And just looking into this and how much of a personal story this is to the creator, the writer, and director, it almost doesn't feel fair to critique like personal experiences. Like, he literally put himself in there. Like, that is supposed to be his aged self, portrayed like this grandpa. And I don't know, I feel very conflicted when it is this deeply personal. And I know what you said already, but I still don't know if I agree.
I feel like you have to look at it like you're not critiquing them. Like, you're not critiquing him and his experience. Like, again, this was written. This isn't his literal experience that happened to him. Even in like biographical type movies. For example, like The Danish Girl is a movie that is biographical, and you can critique that story just for being a story as it's presented, because I mean, it was written, there was a screenplay for it. It was chosen to be like directed in a particular way, and that doesn't have anything to do with that actual experience that happened to that person. So I feel like you can separate them. Me, as somebody who makes artwork about my own personal experiences, it can be hard, I guess, sometimes to like separate like critiques that I'm getting on my artwork, because it's easy to get defensive over something if it's like your own personal story. But I feel like for somebody like this director and where he is in his career, I would imagine that he's probably at a point where he's able to like separate those things and to hear critique on his artwork. And I think just like anything else, like as long as it's in a respectful and thoughtful way, it's okay to critique things, even if they are a personal story to someone.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. But let me know what you guys think, any listeners, in the comments. I think we're about to wrap up here. We really appreciate you sticking around for the interview and our discussion of Canvas.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week. Make sure to leave a comment if you have some ideas of some upcoming podcasts. In our description, you will find links to our Patreon. And we'd like to encourage everybody to like our video, give us a rating, and subscribe. And thanks for being here.
Bye!